So we were talking earlier, and we were talking a little bit about zombies, right?
Zombie apocalypse.
Well, not quite the zombie apocalypse, but I was sharing with you that I spoke to an expert. I can't remember the term. It was something botanist who dealt with like plant medicines in tribal cultures. And I was explaining to you that in Haiti, there are they're called bokors, and they're like priests or they're like shamans. Is it shaman or shamans?
I had
Multiple
not heard
shaman.
anything about this zombie creation
Okay,
in
well-
Haiti. It was new to me.
But it's not new; it's ancient.
Yeah.
But they would take the toxin from the puffer fish and literally create zombies. They were thought of as the undead. And the belief was that people would die, the boker would reanimate them, and now they were like zombies. And they weren't, it wasn't a zombie apocalypse, like they didn't attack, but they were just kind of sluggish. And they lost their will and they would obey commands.
Right.
So back in 2008, I wrote a paper about that, but comparing it to our zombified nation and kind of loosely using the metaphor to describe what the drug companies do to people. And I accidentally went back and read it. I just stumbled on it, and I was like, wow, that was 2008. Like, this is not a new thing. So I thought maybe we should talk about that. What I'll do is I'm going to put a link under this video so that if anybody wants to read it, they can, and we'll talk about it on a future show. But it started us talking and discussing different things about people taking medications, and it seems to be a common theme of what we talk about because it affects so many people that we're helping. And that leads to this concept of addiction. We know we have an opiate issue. When we had Dr. Bleiweiss with us, he said he doesn't deal with that. He doesn't deal with the pain medication people, but it's a problem. But when you start to look at addiction, well, let me ask you, do you get it? I'm being honest, like the idea of addiction. If somebody does something that's bad for them and they keep doing it, like, isn't the answer just stop doing it?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, and this idea of people doing things that they know either aren't working or are hurting them and constantly doing it. It's literally the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So I'm a little surprised when I see people doing it, but it's so common that I've almost become numb to it. And this ability for people not to see that they're doing it to themselves, almost ignoring it. And I think one of our challenges is to help people see how they're hurting themselves and almost say it out loud.
And we're going to go down this road a little bit, and let me say I'm not an expert on addiction, and when I say I don't understand it, I'm being sincere. But I want to read to you, I copied this from a text, because there was a friend of mine, and I just looked back at my old text, because this came to mind. I'm going to read it to you first. I hate her. She sucks in bed. She doesn't take care of herself. All she does is complain. This was him telling me about his girlfriend. What is the obvious answer?
Time to not be with her.
Hello?
Right.
So this was from 2.5 years ago. And I just texted him and I said, are you still with? And he sent me a picture of the two of them. So that to me is the same rationale or absence of rationale as somebody who pursues something continuously, even though it does them harm. But I realize I'm naive because it's obviously a big problem. And I do understand that there's more to it than just stop doing the thing. I had a friend. He was an Olympic athlete. I don't want to mention his name, but he was an Olympic athlete. And he was a fitness expert and a really credible one, a really good one. And he owned some studios and he was really successful. And he went through a rough patch. And he came to my house and he confided in me and he said, Phil, I need some help. I'd like to work with you. I'd like to do some seminars with you. Anyway, I'll make a long story short. We're driving in my car on our way to a seminar. And he takes out a vial, like a prescription vial, and he opens his mouth and does that. Now, I don't know how many pills were in there, but more than 10.
Wow.
And I said, what did you just take? And he said, Percocet. Now, I took a Percocet once when I had my wisdom teeth pulled, and I never forgot it. I mean, I was like walking into the walls.
Right.
I said, how many did you take? He goes, I don't know, like 10 or 12. First of all, how do you function? But second of all, how do you reach the level that you're taking that many of something that is clearly... Anyway, his answer to me was, if I told you to stop breathing, how long could you stop for? He goes, that's what it is. That's what it is for me. Now, I don't want to go down this whole road of telling you that story, but it might be for another show, and maybe we'll even have him on as a guest. But it boggles my mind. I had a beautiful sales girl who worked for me, and she was a model, and she was trying to be an actress, and she went on an audition, and they told her she's too fat. Oh. And she became, I'm going to say crazy. She stopped eating, and she would work out like 2 hours a day, maybe more. She was beautiful, but she started to look like a skeleton, like really a walking skeleton. And I would say to her, you got to stop doing this. And she'd go, no, but I'm too fat. This is classic. Anorexia, bulimia. I couldn't deal with it. And ultimately, I had to let her go because she wasn't able to function. But I was heartbroken because I felt like I wanted to help her. I didn't know how to get through. So I don't do well with this idea of addiction, honestly, because I don't understand it. But it is so common. When people were taking, with Dr. Bleiweiss, who was speaking about the ephedrine caffeine supplements that people were taking to burn fat, those are addictive. And I met a whole lot of people who couldn't get off of them, not because it was a fat burner, because they literally needed it to function. Yeah. So I guess you need to talk me through this. Like, how do we help people who are so addictive to destructive behaviors, especially when we know that we can help them?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is we commonly think of addiction as opiates, and the problem is that it's not just opiates. There are other medications that, that we wouldn't necessarily use the term addiction to, but that our body would become lazy and then stop producing. So just to give an example, melatonin, fairly harmless. You might take it on occasion to help you sleep, but if you're giving yourself melatonin every single night, your body's going to say, great, I don't need to produce it anymore. I'm not going to make that. So would we put it in the same classification as an opiate addiction? Of course not. We wouldn't. But it's the same kind of concept. You're giving something to your body repeatedly, and you're not allowing your body to do what it's supposed to be doing naturally. And to think that there aren't going to be consequences is really naive.
So you are exogenously putting a hormone into your body, in the case of melatonin, that your body would normally manufacture. And the feedback mechanism, that is your hypothalamus, your brain, senses, oh, this is being done for me. I don't have to make as much.
I'll take a break.
I understand that. And it is reparable. If you stop supplementing, I don't know how long you can supplement before you stop and get it back. Right. But I would think in an acute state of melatonin suppression, you can get it back relatively quickly. Dopamine is a whole other story, right? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. And I'm going to take something that we're all aware of and just oversimplify it. But there's a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and that's the dopamine center. And it's been identified in research as kind of the addictive center of the brain. So when somebody does cocaine, they feel invulnerable. They feel unstoppable. They feel this incredible sense of being on top of the world because they get this massive dopamine spike. But they did it exogenously. Something outside of themselves resulted in the spike. So the body countering it brings about a dopamine suppression, a dopamine drop. Now, whether it's an hour or 3 hours later, they have suppressed dopamine. They feel bad, but they also know how to get it back. Do the thing that they did, right? So they do it again and they get a spike. But they don't get back to that same level. Almost, but not quite to the same level. And then they get a drop again, and then they try again. So that I understand in terms of the addictive nature of a drug like that. I'm going to take it a step further. Sugar does something similar. On a lower level, but we're getting elevations in blood sugar, we're getting a spike in dopamine. As a matter of fact, food manufacturers know a term, bliss point. It's what they search for in making like snack foods or dessert foods. It's the point where it is sweet enough to make you go, and you get the dopamine spike, but not so sweet that you get nauseated. So it's like finding that beautiful balance.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the way that it lights up your brain is almost identical to even doing heroin. It would be the same.
So is it fair to say that maybe on a lower level, that same kind of spike in suppression happens from sugar?
100%.
So is it any mystery that there's a link now between psychiatry and nutrition?
I'm surprised that they weren't linked before. I mean, how is that not? You know, I actually, when I was in college, this was over 20 years ago, I had been getting some chronic yeast infections. And so I went to the gynecologist and I said, I was thinking maybe, I need to look at my diet. And the physician, an MD, said to me, your diet has nothing to do with it. Now, if I'm having an overgrowth of yeast, you don't think the food that I'm putting into my body would be related? Now, at that time, the problem was I was drinking a lot of beer. So now I know, that was contributing to this overgrowth of yeast. Of course it's related, but it was shocking to me to even hear a physician say that. Your food has nothing to do with what's presenting in your body.
So is it fair to say your food has everything to do with what's presenting in your body?
100%. And, I walked out of that office thinking, well, I need to look at this further. And this was before I was, a freshman in college, so I didn't have a lot of training. I didn't know about many of the things that I know in nutrition now. And I started researching, which this was before you could just go Google things. You actually had to go to libraries. So, trying to understand.
What's a library?
Exactly. That's what my children would say. And trying to understand what I'm putting in to fuel this system. I ask people all the time, what's your favorite kind of car? What would you buy if you could buy the fanciest car possible? People say, Ferrari, all sorts of fancy cars. Okay, and if you took that fancy car to the gas station, would you get premium gas or would you just get the cheap gas? Well, I would get the premium, of course, if I had that fancy Ferrari.
Yeah, but they spent all their money on the car. They can't afford the premium gas.
Yeah. Why would you put cheap gas in your most valuable machine? This is your most valuable machine. Don't put cheap gas in it.
Well, you put yeast in it.
I know better now.
Okay. Let's switch to alcohol. Alcohol addiction is pretty common. Mm-hmm. Again, intellectually I understand it, but just in terms of reasonable people, if it's destroying your life, stop drinking. Now, I know people will attack me for being so, and I'm not being naive. I'm just telling you, although I really understand it and I could read the research and I could look at the biochemistry, I just feel like if it were me, I would just stop. And I know that's wrong. People go, it's a disease. You can't understand. I can't, although I do. Do you understand, like, the conflict I'm having?
Yes.
Like, I get what it does to your body. I get the dopamine spike, the dopamine spurt. But still, like, if it's destroying your marriage, your life, if your kids are being taken away from you, there's an answer. Stop doing it. So, again, I know that when people hear me say that, often they attack. They go, you're so calloused and you don't understand. I'm really trying to get it for one reason and one reason only, so I can help people, because it's frustrating. It's really frustrating when somebody sits in front of us and has an issue and the solution is so very clear. Stop doing the thing you're doing. So alcohol, at a time in your life when you're going out to clubs and you're partying a little bit, it's a part of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And it does make you feel good. And alcohol has an interesting sort of double whammy because it does slow your reaction time. Mm-hmm. And it does impede glutamate, which kind of lowers the threshold of all of your brain function. But it also spikes GABA, which makes you feel kind of relaxed and less inhibited. And it spikes dopamine, which makes you feel good. So in the short term, it makes you dance when you wouldn't normally dance or approach the girl that you wouldn't normally go up to because you have alcohol strength. But once you go to the point that you need to get up in the morning and take a drink, it's having a different effect on your neurotransmission. It is, in fact, leading to depression. So now you're trying to counter the depression with the thing that's making you depressed.
Yeah, I mean, and, for me, I keep thinking about not just the people that are, truly suffering from an addiction and, maybe seeking help or, going to those. But even the person who's saying, well, I just need a glass of wine every night to unwind. And I don't think people realize how damaging even just a glass of wine every night can actually be. And because I'm a stem cell scientist, I always view it in terms of what's going on with your stem cells. And we know alcohol kills stem cells. And the most obvious thing to look at is somebody who is a heavy drinker, somebody that we would call an alcoholic, or maybe somebody who is a fully functioning alcoholic, always looks older than they are. And this is because stem cells are what turn our tissue over. This is what repairs our tissue and keeps us going. And so if you're drinking alcohol, you're killing stem cells. So you're not going to repair as well as you should. Now, the other thing that's important to remember when you're drinking alcohol is you lose the ability to go through your sleep cycles appropriately. And one of the most important cycles is deep sleep. And this is one of the cycles, the second cycle, when you go down into deep sleep, which may only be about an hour of the night total. This is when your stem cells repair you. If you don't have enough stem cells and you don't go into to deep sleep, that's a double whammy. You are going to age very, very rapidly because you're having cells die off. They're called apoptotic cells. They're dying off. They're suiciding. And you're putting alcohol, so you're killing them at a faster rate. Now you're also not getting the repair that you need. And that's why people who drink look older. And so am I saying that nobody should ever have a drink? Of course not. And will I have a drink? Of course I will. But I'm saying that don't fool yourself in thinking that a glass of wine every night is good for you and that it helps you unwind. There are negative side effects associated with that.
I also think there's a difference between I'll have a drink and I need a drink to unwind. I just think the language is very revealing. I need a drink to whatever, fill in the blank, says this is a need. And alcohol is not truly a human need. So we're talking about addiction if it feels like a need. Correct?
Right.
All right. So I didn't want to talk specifically about addiction, but where we're going with this is we would run into, I don't want to name a name, but an individual comes to us and says, help me. Okay, what do you need help with? All of my joints hurt. I exercise all the time. I can't lose, and they'll grab a part of their body. I can't get rid of this. I can't get rid of this, meaning they want to lose fat. And we say, well, what do you do? And they go, well, I do these 2 workouts every single day. First, I ride my bike really hard, really fast. And then later in the day, I take a class. And I'm burning a lot of calories. So they're doing all of this exercise. And in most cases, they're eating less because they're trying to lose fat. It becomes very obvious that they're not healthy. So the obvious answer, just like I would say to the person who says, I have a horrible cough, and then they light a cigarette, I go, well, stop smoking. Stop doing what you're doing. Stop doing all of this exercise. But that seems wrong because exercise is good. Like if I say alcohol is bad, they're going to go, I know it's bad. But if I say stop exercise, no, exercise is good. And now we have a totally different challenge. So this takes it to a whole different level is I can't even count anymore the number of people I meet who are exercise addicted, and it's destroying them. And they keep looking for the solution in more exercise. So, one of the things is when we start somebody on one of our programs, we put them on a 9-minute routine or a 12-minute routine, they're resistant to it first. But then they start to go, oh my God, I never felt this good. And I'm starting to add muscle and I'm getting leaner and I'm getting toned. How could this be? Because we stopped the destruction.
Yeah, the overtrainer is, I think, one of the most challenging clients to work with. And oftentimes they're distance runners, like they love to run. They'll run for miles and miles and miles. And this amount of stress on the body, this amount of cortisol has nowhere to go. So where does it go? It gets stored in fat. And, I think this is another reminder that we have to give to people. The workout, the exercise is actually stress on your body. It's the recovery where the benefits are. So the workout itself is not really the benefit to you.
Recreational exercisers displaying symptoms of high risk of exercise addiction reported more symptoms of depression and emotional stress. This appears to be very much like the alcohol addiction. I feel bad, so I'm going to do the thing that's leading to the breakdown of my body and my tissues and my mood and my energy.
There's also this weird connection where they feel that if they don't work out 2-3 hours a day, that then they'll get fat. They'll get fatter. You know, it's a strange.
So is exercise good? Yeah. If you have a balance between stress and recovery. But if your stress load is too high and you're adding to your stress load with excessive exercise, it's added stress and it's bad and it's destructive and it's detrimental. So I've studied, I've practiced, we've practiced getting people to break through that and come out the other side. And this is why in the programs that we deliver, we encourage people to follow very simple mindset exercises. But this is the most important thing. Get away from the what you have to do thought and think about the outcome. And that's what they're missing. They're very caught up in the what they have to do today, tomorrow. You know, they missed a day of exercise. They have to make up for it. But somewhere you have to say, is what I'm doing bringing me what I want? And if the answer is no, then you've got to stop. So my question to you is, am I being just as naive with this as I sounded earlier when I was talking about the drug addiction? Like, why can't they just stop?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very similar phenomenon. They're addicted to that adrenaline rush that they get when they work out. Or, you know, maybe it's kind of their getaway. You know, that's where they go to release. And so maybe what they really need is a quiet spot on the beach to go read a book.
And then what happens is eventually it leads to musculoskeletal injury. And now they're more depressed. So the answer to their depression in their mind is more exercise.
Yeah. And all sorts of chronic injuries follow.
So the mindset piece is really important. And all of our trainers have learned that we have to instill in somebody a future memory. This is so important. And at first, it's really hard to teach a personal trainer or a chiropractor or a physician that we've got to change their mindset and we've got to change the way they think, because that will dictate their emotions, their thoughts, their behaviors, their actions, and their outcomes. The physician just wants to give them something that will change their biochemistry. The trainer just wants to put them through an exercise program. But man, it's all of it. There's no way that when somebody has moved along this continuum away from health, you can just give them a routine and they're going to follow it and get a great result. Honestly, I mean, we have a population struggling with unidentified chronic diseases, and I think exercise addiction is a contributing factor to many of them.
Yeah. You know, and I think we talked about this earlier today, the client who says, I will never fill in the blank. And the answer is, you're right, you won't. If that's
For example, I will never lose weight. No matter what I do, I will never lose weight. Yeah, if you hold on to that belief, then
you never will.
You never will. So you've got to change the belief. The future memory is a little bit more than that, because everyone can make a statement. You know, they'll come up to the New Year's resolution and go, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to stick to a program. But it's just a statement. When you access a memory, and I ask people to do this. In fact, if you're watching us right now, you can pause this. Access a memory, any emotional memory in your life from however many years ago, and just literally go there. Close your eyes and go there. And the questions I would ask you are, what were you wearing? And every time I do this, they can tell me. Even if it was 25 years ago. What shoes were you wearing? They can tell me. I say, turn your head with your eyes closed and look to your left. What do you see? They'll tell me. They'll tell me what furniture is there, what artwork is there, what tree is there. Turn to your right. What do you hear? And they'll tell me. Baby crying, my dad's voice, something. What do you feel on your skin? The breeze, cool rain. So in your hippocampus, you store memories, but you don't store them as a statement. You don't go, oh, it was the day I graduated. You have this multi-sensory potential within your brain that attaches itself to a single moment in time. Mm-hmm. We have to teach people to make the future just as multisensory, not just, oh, I'll lose weight, but you've got to create a moment in time. What will life be like? How much weight will you lose? Give me a moment in time. Where will you be? Mm-hmm. What sound do you hear? What are you wearing? How do you feel? Who is with you? And when they can attach to that, at the very least, they change their association with exercise and nutrition. They change their connection to the approach. Yeah, but that's a step that is not commonly used. And when we first share that with people, they go, I don't want to do this thing. Why do I have to close my eyes? Yeah. But when we get them to do it, that's when the change happens. I was
say, like when we first present it, they put the wall up. I'll just be better. They don't want to say anything. But once the wall comes down, the images that they create, the sounds they create, the colors, they can put some real meat around it, and that future memory becomes real. And then achieving the goals just falls right into place.
So again, anybody who's watching who's an expert in psychology might say, Phil, you're just a simpleton. Who are you to think that just doing this will stop the exercise addiction? I see it. Honestly, I see it. It is the piece that changes everything. It is the mindset shift, the connection with a new belief. Not just a saying, not just a voice in your head that goes, you could do it this time, but an actual multi-sensory experience that represents an outcome that is inevitable, but just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't just apply to the exercise addiction, but also the people who are in chronic pain and who have become attached to that and are almost addicted to their misery. Mm. That's their identity. They're addicted to it. That's all they know.
Now, they would argue that. They would go, no, I'm not.
Right.
Because it operates somewhere beneath the conscious level. Mm-hmm. So I always say this to you, and I mean it, we have a lot of work to do, but it's rewarding because when we get to those breakthroughs, and honestly, that's why I love doing this with you, because people are going to watch this and hear this, and even if one says, I'm going to try that future memory thing, and as a result, finally gets an outcome. Weight loss resistance has become a specialty of ours. Mm-hmm. And it's the condition where somebody goes, I've tried everything and I can't lose weight. They believe that what they're saying is true, but they haven't tried everything. They've only tried the things they've tried. So when we can change that belief and get them to connect with a different outcome, now they may listen when we say, you don't need the glass of wine every day. Not if you want this outcome. Mm-hmm. And the fast food that you're eating, it's kind of a contributor to your depression. If you stop eating the fast food, the good feelings in your future memory, they're going to come.
I wish I could remember the physician's name from college. I like to call him.
Well, maybe he's watching.
The diet does matter. I know that now.
I'm sure he knows that by now, too. I'm hoping he knows that by now, too.
Maybe not.
So, and there's one more thing I just want to share in this episode, and that is that I've gone through a lot of learning. And every little victory feels good in the moment, but it also is an aha that says, now we can have more victories, because whatever we did that worked, let's do this with more people. And a part of what I struggled with for years was I was anxious for the outcome. So I'd work with somebody and I'd work with them for 6 months and they'd get a great result and we'd high five and hug and they go, this is awesome. I don't need you anymore. And then I would see them 3 months later and they're back in the condition they were in before. And it's really no different than the person, who says, I quit smoking. And then you see them 6 months later and they're smoking. And what I've learned is it's not willpower. It is not an issue of willpower. Mm-hmm. It's an issue of stress. There's always a stress trigger that reverts them back. So we can bring about lasting change in anyone who's willing to go through a belief shift. But they're going to go through 4 distinctive waves. And this is really important because anybody who's just joining us now and listening to this, if you go, I've tried it and it didn't work, I've tried it and it didn't stick, it's because you didn't go through all 4 waves. So I call these the 4 waves of change. The first one, let's just, for the sake of this discussion, say there are 2 pathways. One is the old pathway and one is the potential new pathway. Mm-hmm. The old pathway I call the EEM pathway, the emotional experiential memory. It's the one you follow because it's the one you follow. There's no rationale behind it other than this is what my emotions have led me to do. This is where I keep ending up. I'll keep doing it. So you have this really well-developed path. But the outcome at the end of that path is not what you want. So now you create the future memory, and it's down a different path. You go, here's what I really want. This path won't lead you there. So you've got to start to carve a new path. And this is the part of the brain that creates possibility, the prefrontal cortex. So we'll call this the EEM path, which is the one you're stuck on. The PFC, prefrontal cortex, is the new one. The first wave of change is just that, just the recognition that you need to create a new pathway, because it gives you ownership. Then you start to realize, wait a minute, I'm doing this because I'm following this path. And if I create a new pathway, just that awareness is the first wave of change. So if normally you wake up every day, you have a donut and a cup of coffee, and now you understand some things about the program, you create the future memory, you're going to wake up and be driven to the coffee and the donut, but you'll find something in yourself to go, I'm not going to do it today. That's the beginning of a new pathway. Now, when I say a pathway, it's literal. Dendrites connect and you develop neural bridges. So we're starting to form a pathway. The second wave of change is duality. You now have two equal pathways. And it's a conscious choice. So you still wake up and you still have the impulse for the donut and the coffee, but it's much easier now to choose the other pathway. The third wave of change, the EEM pathway is weakening and the PFC pathway is dominant. So now the good pathway is the dominant one. So now you go, this is easy. I've achieved the change. I'm set. This is the new me. And then a stress happens. Whatever it is, a stressor. Somebody dies, somebody leaves you, somebody gets hurt, you lose a job, you lose your income, something happens, and you just automatically go back to that old pathway. Mm-hmm. So you haven't completed the process until you get to the fourth wave. And the fourth wave is when that EEM pathway goes away. It's like weeds overgrow it, new trees develop, there's no more pathway, and now this is what you do. So that awareness has given me patience and the ability to coach people over time. So although the outcome can happen quickly, the habit may take some time. But if you understand the mechanism, you stay the course.
Yeah, and I think most people don't understand that process.
Which
so just giving them that power is big.
Yeah.
Power of understanding.
Yeah, and
taking
now
control.
So if you say to somebody, stop eating sugar, and here's a strategy so after 3 days you'll never crave it again. They can get through the 3 days because there's a new end in sight. Right. Now, you have to give them the strategy. Thankfully, we do. Stop drinking alcohol, and after a couple of weeks, you won't miss it, and you'll feel better, and you'll actually start to wake up and feel powerful.
Right.
But that's the kind of guidance that these people need because most of them are stuck, and their trainer and their doctor have never been taught how to get them unstuck. So what does a doctor do? Give them some kind of mood-changing drug, some kind of serotonin reuptake inhibitor, rather than saying your diet is making you depressed, your lifestyle is making you depressed, and your depression is making you depressed because you're breaking down as a result of it. We need to correct. They medicate. Are they bad? No, they're not bad. They're trying to help you. This is the strategy that was given to them. This is what the drug companies teach them should be done. Mm-hmm. I think we know something that they don't right now.
We do.
Yeah. So I'm not claiming, and again, the way I started off was just to reveal my own naivety. I'm not claiming we can fix addictions. And really, I am very frustrated when I'm trying to work with somebody who has a really destructive addiction. But I think the irrational thought of, I need to keep doing what I'm doing, even though I'm not getting what I want, is something we can change. It's not easy, but it's something we can change. And I think when somebody's ready, it's something they can change themselves.
Yep.
So,
I'm excited. I think somebody's watching this right now, and I think they should come in.
And I think the person who is watching it who doesn't have this issue but knows somebody should share this.
Agreed.
So when I say to you we have a lot of work to do, you think the day will ever come that I go, we did it.
We got them all. Everybody's good.
That's my future memory, the day that everybody's good. So until we speak again, which is probably going to be in about a week, if not sooner, be better, everybody.